The metallic screech of the train's wheels against the tracks pierced through my fitful sleep, a harsh reminder of another exhausting day coming to an end. My eyelids felt like they were lined with sandpaper, the result of 3 consecutive night shifts and a colicky 7-month-old who refused to sleep more than 2 hours at a stretch. The gentle weight of Lily pressed against my chest was the only comfort in a world that seemed determined to break me. The train car smelled of wet wool and artificial heat, that peculiar mix of human bodies packed too closely together on a rainy evening. My back ached from the hard plastic seat, but I dared not shift positions for fear of waking Lily. Her soft breaths, warm against my neck, had finally settled into the rhythm of deep sleep after what felt like hours of fussing. Next stop, Westbrook Heights. The automated announcement crackled overhead, the voice tinny and distant. 4 more stops until our tiny apartment in the less desirable part of the city. 4 more stops until I could collapse onto our second-hand couch and maybe, just maybe, get a few hours of uninterrupted sleep before my morning shift at the diner. I hadn't always been this person, exhausted, barely surviving, invisible to the world around me. Before Lily, before Derek had cleaned out our savings and disappeared with his secretary, I'd been working toward my nursing degree. Now, at 27, I was just trying to keep us fed and housed. The dream of a better life pushed so far down I could barely remember what it felt like to want more. My eyelids grew heavier with each gentle rock of the train. Just a few minutes, I told myself. Just a few minutes to rest my eyes. The steady rhythm lulled me deeper, my grip on consciousness slipping away like water through cupped hands. Lily was secure in her carrier, strapped to my chest. We were safe. Just a few minutes. I don't know how long I was out. Could have been minutes. Could have been an hour. What woke me wasn't the announcement of our stop or the jolt of the train, but the sudden absence of weight against my chest. My eyes flew open, panic surging through my veins like ice water. Lily was gone. My baby was gone. A primal scream built in my throat, my hands frantically patting the empty carrier still strapped to my chest. But before the sound could escape, I saw him, standing 3 feet away, cradling my daughter with an expertise that spoke of experience, was a man who didn't belong in this world of late-night commuters and minimum wage struggles. Even in my disoriented state, I registered the sharp cut of his black suit, the fabric clearly worth more than I made in a month. His dark hair was styled with perfect precision, not a strand out of place despite the humid evening. But it was his stance that truly set him apart. Feet planted firmly, shoulders squared, as if he owned not just the ground beneath him, but the very air around him. And in his arms, looking impossibly small and fragile, was Lily, my Lily, staring up at him with wide, curious eyes instead of screaming in terror at being held by a stranger. She was about to fall. His voice was low, a rumble that seemed to vibrate in the air between us, accent hinting at Italian heritage. You were sleeping. Carrier came loose. I scrambled to my feet, the blood rushing to my head making the world tilt momentarily. Give her back, I demanded, though my voice cracked, betraying the fear coursing through me. Please, she's my daughter. His eyes met mine for the first time, and I felt a physical jolt, like touching an electric fence. They were an unusual shade, somewhere between gray and blue, but it was their intensity that froze me in place. They assessed, calculated, saw through every defense I'd ever built. I know she's yours, he replied, making no immediate move to return her. Instead, his attention shifted back to Lily, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. She has your eyes. Unusual color. A large man in a dark suit materialized beside him, whispering something in his ear. I hadn't even noticed him before, as if my brain had been unable to process more than the immediate threat to my child. Now I realized we weren't alone. 2 more men in similar attire stood nearby, creating a loose perimeter around us, my throat constricted with fresh fear. Who was this man, with his bespoke suit and personal security detail? What did he want with us? Please, I whispered, holding out trembling hands. She needs me. Something flickered across his face, an emotion I couldn't name, before he stepped forward. But instead of simply handing Lily back, he moved into my personal space, close enough that I caught his scent. Expensive cologne with undertones of leather and something darker, like wood smoke. With deliberate care, he transferred Lily back into my arms, his fingers brushing against mine in the process. The contact sent an involuntary shiver up my spine. "The strap was broken," he said, nodding toward the carrier. "It's not safe." I clutched Lily to my chest, relief making my knees weak. She didn't fuss at the transition, simply continued to stare at the stranger with fascination. I checked her over instinctively, though she seemed perfectly content. "Thank you," I managed, social conditioning overriding my fear. I don't know what happened. I'm usually so careful. Exhaustion happens," he replied. And for a moment, I thought I detected a note of genuine understanding in his voice. Then his eyes hardened again, sweeping over my worn coat. The dark circles I knew shadowed my eyes. The scuffed bag at my feet. "Where do you live?" The question sent a fresh spike of alarm through me. "Why would you need to know that?" A slight lift of his eyebrow indicated I'd surprised him with my resistance. The man beside him shifted, hand moving slightly toward what I suddenly realized was likely a concealed weapon. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain everyone in the train car could hear it. "Your stop," the stranger clarified, though I didn't entirely believe that was his original intent. "Which stop is yours?" "Westridge." I lied automatically, naming a stop that was still several away from my actual destination. Something instinctive told me not to reveal where we lived to this man, no matter how helpfully he'd caught my daughter. His lips curved into the barest hint of a smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. "You're lying." The train began to slow, the automated voice announcing, "Arriving at Eastlake Station. This is us," I said quickly, gathering my bag with one hand while keeping Lily secure with the other. "Thank you again for your help." I moved toward the doors, desperate to put distance between us and this unsettling encounter. But as I tried to pass, his hand shot out, fingers wrapping firmly around my upper arm. Not painful, but inescapable. "Your carrier is broken," he stated, as if this simple fact gave him the right to detain me. "How will you safely carry your child?" "I'll manage," I replied, trying to pull away. "I always do." "Always?" He tilted his head slightly. "You often find yourself with broken equipment for your child?" Heat rushed to my face. Embarrassment, indignation, and fear creating a potent mix. "That's not... I didn't mean... Antonio." He addressed the man beside him without looking away from me. "Get Ms." The pause was deliberate, an invitation for me to fill in the blank. I hesitated, weighing the danger of giving my name against the reality that I was already caught in whatever this was. "Emma," I finally said. "Emma Reeves. Get Ms. Reeves a car to her actual home," he continued, satisfaction evident in the slight curl of his lip. "And have someone purchase a proper carrier for her daughter." "That's really not necessary," I protested, panic rising at the thought of these men knowing where I lived. "We're fine, really." The train doors opened with a pneumatic hiss. Other passengers moved around us, some casting curious glances our way, but no one intervened. In this city, people minded their own business as a survival tactic. "I insist," he said, in a tone that made it clear this wasn't a request but a command. His hand remained on my arm as he guided me toward the exit, his security detail closing ranks around us. As we stepped onto the platform, the cool night air hit my face, momentarily clearing the fog of fear and confusion. I needed to think, needed to find a way out of this situation without escalating it. Lily began to fuss, perhaps sensing my distress, and I bounced her gently, trying to project a calm I absolutely did not feel. "Look," I said, summoning what little courage I had left. "This is very generous of you, but I don't accept rides from strangers, especially not with my daughter." His expression didn't change, but something dangerous flashed in those gray-blue eyes. "I'm not a stranger to Lily anymore, am I?" He reached out one finger, which Lily promptly grabbed with her tiny hand. "She knows quality when she sees it." The casual possessiveness in his gesture sent a chill through me. Who did this man think he was? "Who are you?" I asked, the question escaping before I could consider the wisdom of it. For a long moment he studied me, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Matteo," he finally said. "Matteo Ricci." The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it, with absolute confidence that it should mean something, told me it was important, perhaps even notorious. "Well, Mr. Ricci, thank you for your help on the train, but Lily and I really need to be going now." "On our own?" I tried again to move past him, but the circle of suits made it impossible without physically pushing through. Emma. He said my name like he was testing it, rolling it over his tongue. When was the last time someone helped you? Truly helped you? Without expecting anything in return? The question hit with unexpected force, finding the crack in my carefully constructed armor. When was the last time? Before Derek left? Before my mother died 3 years ago? Maybe never. That's not a simple car ride, he continued, his voice softening to something almost gentle. A safe way to carry your child. Small things, easily given. And what do you want in return? I asked, because no one gave something for nothing, not in my experience. His smile widened fractionally, as if I'd finally asked the right question. Dinner. Dinner? I repeated, sure I'd misheard. Tomorrow night. I'll send a car. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even really an offer. It was a statement of what would happen, as inevitable as the tide. I can't, I stammered, mind racing through the impossibilities. No babysitter, nothing to wear, shifts at work I couldn't afford to miss. I have Lily, I have work, all taken care of. He interrupted smoothly. The car will come at 7. Wear something nice. He reached out, this time brushing a strand of hair from my face. The gesture strangely intimate, though you'd look beautiful in anything. Before I could form a coherent response, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb, as if conjured by his will alone. Antonio opened the rear door, waiting expectantly. Until tomorrow, Emma Reeves, Mateo said, stepping back with a slight incline of his head. Surrounded by his men, with Lily growing increasingly fussy in my arms, and with the strange magnetic pull of Matteo Ricci's presence, I found myself guided into the back seat of the car, the door closing behind me with a definitive thunk. As the car pulled away from the curb, I caught a final glimpse of him through the tinted window. He stood perfectly still, watching us leave, an expression on his face I couldn't quite decipher, but that sent a shiver of both fear and something else, something I refused to acknowledge, down my spine. What had I just gotten myself into? And more importantly, how was I going to get out of it? The car glided through the night-darkened streets, its quiet luxury so at odds with my usual commute that it felt like I'd stepped into someone else's life. The leather seats were butter-soft beneath my worn jeans, and the privacy partition between us and the driver gave the surreal feeling of being cocooned in a mobile sanctuary. Lily had settled against my chest. Her earlier fussing subsided into curious coos as she batted at the small, twinkling lights embedded in the car's ceiling. Pretty lights for the little princess, the driver commented, his voice coming through a discreet speaker. Despite his friendly tone, I noticed his eyes constantly scanning the road, the mirrors, vigilant in a way that spoke of more than just professional driving skills. I clutched Lily closer, trying to process what had just happened. Matteo Ricci. The name tumbled through my mind like a stone down a hillside, gathering momentum. There was something familiar about it, something that tugged at the edges of my memory. Had I seen it in a newspaper, heard it whispered at the diner? How does Mr. Ricci know where I live? I finally asked, unable to contain the question any longer. The driver's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, meeting mine briefly before returning to the road. Mr. Ricci has resources, ma'am. A non-answer that told me everything I needed to know. My address wasn't something I'd shared, which meant he'd found it through other means, immediately, effortlessly. The realization sent a fresh wave of unease through me. And tomorrow night, this dinner, I began, unsure how to even frame my question. All arranged, ma'am. Car will come at 7, as Mr. Ricci said. But I can't. I have a child. I have work. Childcare has been arranged with a trusted professional. Your employer has been informed you're taking personal time. Compensated, of course. My mouth fell open. He can't just... That's my life he's rearranging. The driver didn't respond, his silence more effective than any argument. Of course, Matteo Ricci could rearrange my life. He already had. When the car finally pulled up to my apartment building, the one with the peeling paint and security door that hadn't actually locked in months, I felt a fresh flush of shame. This was my reality, the struggling single mom in the bad part of town, What game was a man like Ricci playing by inserting himself into it? "Wait," the driver said as I reached for the door handle. He exited, scanned the street with practiced efficiency, then opened my door. From the trunk, he retrieved a large bag with a high-end department store logo I recognized from advertisements I'd longingly flipped past in magazines. "The carrier, as promised," he explained, handing it over. "Plus a few extras Mr. Ricci thought you might need." I wanted to refuse it, to maintain that last shred of independence, but the practical reality won out. My carrier was broken. Lily needed a safe way to be carried, and pride wouldn't keep us warm or fed. "Thank you," I managed, taking the bag with my free hand. 7 tomorrow, he reminded me, returning to the driver's seat. "Wear the blue dress." Before I could ask what blue dress, the car had pulled away, leaving me standing on the cracked sidewalk, the contrast between its sleek darkness and my shabby surroundings, a perfect metaphor for how out of place Matteo Ricci was in my world. Inside my small one-bedroom apartment, I set Lily in her playpen and emptied the contents of the bag onto my threadbare couch. The carrier was top of the line, the kind I'd looked at longingly in stores before settling for the second-hand one that had just failed me. But it wasn't alone. There was formula, the expensive organic brand I couldn't afford, diapers, soft new onesies in Lily's size, and at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, a dress in the exact shade of blue as a summer sky. I held it up with trembling hands. The fabric whispered against my skin, silk, and something equally luxurious. It was simple in design but clearly expensive, the kind of understated elegance that required no embellishment, and it was exactly my size. How did he know? How could he possibly know? A small envelope fell from the dress's folds. Inside was a simple card, heavy cream stock with a single line of bold, masculine handwriting. "Until tomorrow. M." I sank onto the couch. The dress pooled in my lap like spilled water. What had I gotten myself into? More importantly, what did Matteo Ricci want with me and Lily? Men like him didn't notice women like me. Not unless they wanted something. The question was, what? Sleep came fitfully that night, my dreams haunted by gray-blue eyes that seemed to see straight through to my soul. Morning brought no clarity, just the harsh reality of bills stacked on my tiny kitchen counter and a text message from my boss confirming I had the night off. With pay, lucky you. The casual addition of, "Your friend seems very generous," sent a fresh spiral of anxiety through me. What had Ricci told them? What did they now think of me? I spent the day in a state of nervous anticipation, jumping at every sound, checking my phone compulsively though I had no missed calls or messages. Lily, at least, was content with her new toys. Yes, there had been toys in the bag too. Educational ones made of wood and organic fabrics, the kind I would have chosen if money were no object. At 5 o'clock, there was a knock at my door. I froze. Lily in my arms, suddenly certain it was him, that Matteo had come early, that he would see the full extent of my poverty in the harsh light of day. Instead, when I cautiously peered through the peephole, I saw a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a professional demeanor, carrying what looked like a compact case of supplies. "Ms. Reeves, I'm Patricia, the childcare professional Mr. Ricci arranged. May I come in?" I hesitated, my protective instincts warring with the reality that I had no alternative childcare and no way to contact Ricci to cancel this dinner that was beginning to feel more and more like a command performance. "I have excellent references," she continued, clearly sensing my hesitation. She held up her phone, showing a background check certification and what appeared to be a license. "I specialize in infant care and have worked for Mr. Ricci's associates before." Associates. Not friends, not family. Associates. The word choice didn't escape me. Finally, I opened the door. Patricia entered with the confident ease of someone used to stepping into strangers' homes and taking charge of their most precious possessions. "What a beautiful baby," she cooed, smiling at Lily. "Those eyes are remarkable, thank you," I murmured, still uncertain but somewhat reassured by her professional manner. "She's usually good with new people, but if she gets fussy, she likes to be walked while you hum. Any tune will do. And she might be teething, so there's a gel in the—" "Ms. Reeves," Patricia interrupted gently. I have all the information I need about Lily's routine and preferences. Mr. Ricci was very thorough in his briefing. Now, why don't you get ready? The car will be here in less than 2 hours. Again, that disorienting feeling of my life being managed without my input. How did Ricci know Lily's routine? Had he somehow accessed her pediatrician records? The thought should have terrified me, but instead, I felt a strange mix of indignation and something else. Something dangerously close to being impressed by his thoroughness, his attention to detail when it came to my daughter's care. Right, I said faintly. I should get ready. The next hour and a half passed in a blur of nervous preparation. I showered, taking advantage of having someone else watch Lily to indulge in more than my usual 3-minute rinse. I dried my honey-brown hair until it fell in soft waves past my shoulders, applied minimal makeup with shaking hands, and finally slipped on the blue dress. It fit perfectly, hugging my curves in a way that was flattering without being overtly sexual. The silk caressed my skin like water, making me acutely aware of how long it had been since I'd worn anything that wasn't chosen for practicality or purchased from a clearance rack. When I emerged from my bedroom, Patricia nodded approvingly. "He has good taste," she remarked. "The color brings out your eyes." I flushed, uncomfortable with the implication that Matteo Ricci had personally selected a dress designed to enhance my features. "It's just dinner," I said, as much to convince myself as her, to thank him for helping with Lily on the train. Patricia's expression suggested she didn't believe this any more than I did, but she simply nodded again. Of course. At precisely 7 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Car waiting downstairs. Antonio, I presumed. Ricci's shadow. I knelt beside Lily, who was contentedly playing with one of her new toys. "Mommy will be back soon, sweetheart." Be good for Patricia. I kissed her downy head, inhaling her sweet baby scent for courage. "She'll be perfectly fine," Patricia assured me. "Take as long as you need." The phrasing sent another ripple of unease through me. As long as I needed, or as long as Ricci wanted. The same sleek car from last night waited at the curb, Antonio holding the door open with the same expressionless efficiency. He nodded once in greeting, his eyes performing a quick assessment of my appearance. "Ms. Reeves." "Where are we going?" I asked as I slid into the back seat, determined to get at least some information. "Valletta," he replied, shutting the door. My eyes widened involuntarily. Valletta was the most exclusive restaurant in the city, the kind of place where reservations were booked months in advance and the prices weren't listed on the menu, because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. The drive took us from my neighborhood, with its graffiti-tagged storefronts and check-cashing places, into the glittering heart of downtown. As the scenery outside changed, becoming progressively more polished, I felt increasingly out of place despite the beautiful dress. No amount of silk could change who I was. A struggling single mother with 2 jobs and mounting debt, not someone who dined at Valletta on a Tuesday night. We pulled up to the restaurant's discreet entrance, where a valet immediately opened my door. Antonio materialized beside me, guiding me with a light touch to my elbow through the ornate doors. Inside, the maitre d' snapped to attention the moment he saw us. "Mr. Ricci's guest," Antonio stated simply. Of course," the man practically bowed. "Mr. Ricci is waiting in the private dining room. Please, follow me." A private dining room. My stomach clenched with renewed anxiety. I'd expected, or perhaps hoped, to be in the main restaurant, surrounded by other diners. The thought of being alone with Matteo Ricci in a private space made my pulse quicken. The maitre d' led us through the main dining area, where I felt eyes following our progress. Whether they were looking at Antonio, clearly security rather than a dinner date, or at me, clearly not belonging in this world of wealth and privilege, I couldn't tell. Either way, I kept my gaze straight ahead, chin lifted in a show of confidence I didn't feel. We reached a door at the back of the restaurant, which the maitre d' opened with a flourish before stepping aside. Antonio nodded for me to enter, not following. I took a deep breath and stepped over the threshold. The private dining room was intimate without being claustrophobic, dominated by a table set for 2 near a window overlooking the city lights. The lighting was soft, the decor elegant without being ostentatious, and standing by the window, His back to me as he gazed out at the view was Matteo Ricci. He turned at the sound of the door closing, and for a moment I forgot to breathe. If he'd been imposing on the train, here in his element he was magnificent. His suit was clearly bespoke, charcoal gray that highlighted the breadth of his shoulders. His dark hair was styled with that same perfect precision, and when his eyes met mine, I felt that same jolt of electricity. "Emma," he said, my name sounding different in his mouth, richer somehow. "You look beautiful." I swallowed hard, fighting the unexpected flutter in my stomach at the simple compliment. "Thank you for the dress. It wasn't necessary." "It was entirely necessary," he replied, crossing the room toward me. "And entirely worth it." As he drew closer, I caught his scent again. That combination of expensive cologne and something darker, more primal. He stopped just inside my personal space, close enough that I had to tilt my head slightly to maintain eye contact. "Are you hungry?" he asked. The question weighted with something beyond its literal meaning. "Starving," I answered honestly, thinking of the lunch I'd skipped out of nervous anticipation for tonight. His lips curved into that same slight smile I'd seen on the train platform. "Good. I've arranged a special menu for us tonight." He guided me to the table with a hand at the small of my back, the heat of his palm seeping through the thin silk of my dress. As he held my chair and I sank into it, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into a beautiful trap, one lined with silk and scented with expensive cologne. And the most dangerous part? A small, treacherous voice in my mind whispered that I might not want to escape. Block 3. The first course arrived almost immediately after we were seated, delicate scallops nestled on beds of vibrant microgreens, drizzled with a sauce that smelled of citrus and herbs I couldn't identify. A waiter poured wine into crystal glasses that caught the light like liquid diamonds. I hadn't even seen Matteo signal for service. It was as if the staff anticipated his desires before he expressed them. "Tell me about Lily," Matteo said, his intense gaze fixed on me as I tentatively sampled the scallop. The flavor exploded on my tongue. Buttery, perfectly seared, unlike anything I'd ever tasted. I nearly choked on my bite, surprised by his opening question. Men on dates, if this even was a date, typically started with questions about me, not my child. "What do you want to know?" I asked cautiously, setting down my fork. "Everything," he replied simply. "Her age, her favorite things. What makes her laugh?" There was something in his expression I couldn't quite decipher, a hunger that had nothing to do with the exquisite food before us. I took a sip of wine to steady myself, the rich liquid warming my throat. "She's 7 months old," I began, unable to keep the natural pride from my voice. "She's just starting to babble, not real words yet, but she has conversations with her stuffed rabbit that sound incredibly serious. She loves music, especially when I sing to her, even though my voice is terrible." I smiled at the memory of Lily's delighted giggles when I danced around our small apartment, singing off-key lullabies. "And her father?" Matteo asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp as flint. The question landed like a slap, even though I should have anticipated it. I set down my wine glass, suddenly less hungry. "Not in the picture," I replied tersely. "By choice? His or yours? Does it matter?" Matteo leaned back slightly, studying me with that penetrating gaze. "It matters a great deal, Emma." The way he said my name, almost like a caress, sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. I squared my shoulders, determined not to be intimidated. "He left when I was 5 months pregnant," I admitted, seeing no point in lying. "Cleaned out our savings, moved to Florida with his secretary. Classic story, nothing special about it." "His name?" The question was soft but carried an undercurrent that raised the hair on the back of my neck. "Why do you want to know?" "Humor me." I hesitated, then sighed. "Derek Harmon. But it doesn't matter. He signed away his parental rights. We're better off without him." Something dark flashed across Matteo's face. A flicker of emotion so raw and dangerous that it momentarily transformed his handsome features into something predatory. Then it was gone, replaced by that controlled mask of civility. "Yes," he agreed quietly. "You are." The second course arrived, pasta with truffle and a cream sauce that smelled divine. I used the interruption to redirect the conversation. "Now my turn for questions," I said with more courage than I felt. Who are you, Matteo Ricci? Really? He twirled pasta around his fork with elegant precision. I'm a businessman. What kind of business requires an armed security detail? His lips quirked. The profitable kind. That's not an answer. It's the only one you need right now. His tone was gentle but firm. Let's just say I have interests in various enterprises across the city. Imports, exports, real estate, investment opportunities. The vague description could have meant anything from legitimate entrepreneur to something far more sinister. Given the armed men and the way the restaurant staff practically genuflected in his presence, I was beginning to suspect the latter. And why am I here? I pressed, setting down my fork. Why did you arrange childcare, clear my schedule, buy me a dress? Why this interest in a random woman and her baby from a train? For a long moment, Matteo was silent, his expression contemplative as he studied me. When he finally spoke, his voice had dropped to a lower register that seemed to resonate in my chest. There was nothing random about our meeting, Emma. A chill ran through me despite the warmth of the room. What do you mean? I've been aware of you for some time. The pasta turned to ash in my mouth. That's not possible. We've never met before last night. Not directly, no. He took a sip of his wine, watching me over the rim of his glass. But I make it my business to know what happens in this city, especially in my territories. Territories. Not neighborhoods or districts, territories. I don't understand, I said, though a terrible suspicion was beginning to form. 3 months ago, you were working the late shift at a pharmacy on Westridge Avenue when it was robbed. The thief had a knife. You stepped between him and a pregnant customer. My blood ran cold. The incident had been terrifying. A desperate man with wild eyes and a blade that glinted under the fluorescent lights. I'd acted on instinct, pushing the heavily pregnant woman behind me while trying to calm the robber. It had worked. He'd taken the cash and left without hurting anyone. I'd given a statement to the police, but nothing had ever come of it. How do you know about that? I whispered. The pregnant woman was Sofia Vitale, my cousin's wife. Matteo set down his glass with deliberate care. She told me about the brave pharmacy worker who protected her and her unborn child with no thought for her own safety. She described you, your unusual eyes, the way you spoke to the robber with compassion despite your fear. I remembered the woman's grateful tears, her tight hug after the police had come and gone. I hadn't seen her since that night. The baby was born healthy, Matteo continued, his voice softening. A boy. They named him Marco. I'm glad, I said sincerely, though my mind was racing. But that still doesn't explain all of this. I wanted to thank you properly, to meet the woman Sofia described. His eyes held mine, intense and unwavering. I had Antonio find out who you were, where you worked. The plan was to approach you, offer my gratitude and perhaps financial assistance. Sofia mentioned you were expecting a child of your own. You've been watching me for months? The thought was both terrifying and strangely exhilarating. Keeping tabs, he corrected. Making sure you were safe, that you had what you needed. I didn't have what I needed, I countered, a spark of indignation cutting through my fear. I've been barely surviving, working 2 jobs, struggling to pay rent. Something like regret crossed his features. I was advised to keep my distance. My attention can sometimes complicate people's lives. I let out a humorless laugh. And this isn't complicating my life? The circumstances changed when I saw you on that train, he said, leaning forward slightly. When I saw how exhausted you were, how the carrier came loose. When I held your daughter in my arms. His voice took on a different quality, almost tender. She looked up at me with your eyes, and I knew I couldn't keep my distance any longer. The 3rd course arrived, perfectly seared lamb with roasted vegetables. But I barely noticed it. My mind was too busy trying to process what Matteo was telling me. He'd been watching me for months, keeping tabs, as he put it. The privacy violation was disturbing, yet a small part of me wondered if his surveillance was the reason the landlord had suddenly given me an extension when I was late with rent last month, or why my boss at the diner had been unusually understanding about my erratic schedule. What do you want from me? I finally asked. the question that had been hovering between us since the moment he'd taken Lily from my arms on the train. Mateo's eyes darkened, the gray-blue deepening to the color of a storm-tossed sea. Your time. Your company. He paused, his gaze dropping briefly to my lips before returning to my eyes. For now. The implication behind those last two words hung in the air between us. For now. With the promise, or threat, of more to come. I'm a package deal, I said firmly. Lily is my priority, my everything. As she should be. He agreed readily. I would never ask you to compromise your daughter's well-being, and if I say no, if I walk out of here right now. His expression didn't change, but something in the set of his shoulders shifted slightly. The car would take you home. Patricia would be compensated for her time. You would never hear from me again. I didn't believe him. Not entirely. Men like Matteo Ricci didn't accept rejection easily. But the illusion of choice was better than none at all. And if I say yes? What exactly would that mean? A small, satisfied smile played at the corners of his mouth, as if he already knew my answer. Dinner, like tonight. Perhaps a weekend away now and then. Access to resources that could make your life, and Lily's, more comfortable. In exchange for what? I pressed, needing clarity. Sex? His eyes flashed at my bluntness. I'm not purchasing your body, Emma. I'm asking for a chance to know you. The rest will come naturally, or not at all. I took a long sip of wine, buying time to think. The rational part of my brain was screaming warnings. This man was dangerous, powerful, clearly involved in activities that required armed guards. Yet another part, a part I'd thought had died when Derek walked out, was awakening to the possibility of something beyond mere survival, of being seen, valued, desired. I need time to think, I said finally. Matteo nodded, accepting this without argument. Of course. The rest of the meal passed in a blur of exquisite flavors and cautious conversation. Matteo asked about my background, my interrupted nursing studies, my hopes for Lily's future. He listened with genuine interest, his intense focus making me feel as though my words actually mattered. In turn, I gathered fragments of information about him. Born in Sicily, came to America as a teenager, built his empire, his word, from nothing. He spoke of family with reverence, of loyalty as the highest virtue, of protection as sacred duty. By the time dessert arrived, a delicate confection of chocolate and berries, I was both exhausted and exhilarated, as if I'd run an emotional marathon. It's getting late, Matteo observed, checking a watch that probably cost more than my annual rent. You should get back to Lily. The consideration surprised me, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Everything about this evening had been choreographed to perfection, including his apparent respect for my maternal responsibilities. Thank you for dinner, I said, meaning it despite my lingering reservations. It was enlightening. The pleasure was mine. He signaled for the bill with a slight nod to the hovering waiter, though I suspected the entire evening had been arranged and paid for long before I'd arrived. As we rose to leave, Matteo stepped close, his hand finding the small of my back again. The casual possessiveness of the gesture should have bothered me more than it did. 1 week, he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. I'll give you 1 week to consider my proposition. Then I'll come for your answer. The phrasing, I'll come for your answer, sent a delicious shiver down my spine. Not I'll call or I'll ask. I'll come for. As if the outcome was already determined, the only variable being my recognition of the inevitable. Outside, Antonio waited beside the now familiar black car. The night air was cool against my flushed skin, the city lights creating halos in the light fog that had descended during our dinner. Antonio will see you home safely, Matteo said, his hand still at my back. Patricia will stay with Lily until you arrive. I nodded, suddenly unsure what the proper protocol was for ending such an unusual evening. A handshake seemed too formal, a hug too familiar. Matteo solved the dilemma by taking my hand, raising it to his lips in an old-world gesture that should have seemed affected, but instead made my pulse jump. His lips were warm against my skin, his eyes never leaving mine. Until next week, Emma Reeves, he said softly, releasing my hand. I slipped into the waiting car, my skin still tingling where his lips had touched. As Antonio closed the door, I caught a final glimpse of Matteo standing on the sidewalk, commanding in his perfect suit, watching the car with an expression that combined satisfaction and hunger in equal measure. The drive home passed in silence, my mind too full of swirling thoughts to attempt conversation with the stoic Antonio. When we arrived at my building, he escorted me to my door, despite my assurances that it wasn't necessary. Mr. Ricci's instructions was his only explanation. Inside, Patricia sat reading on my couch, looking perfectly at ease in my shabby apartment. She glanced up with a smile that held no judgment. "Lily went down about an hour ago," she reported. "Not a peep since." "Thank you," I said, suddenly exhausted now that the adrenaline of the evening was fading, "for taking such good care of her." Patricia gathered her things with quiet efficiency. "My pleasure. She's a beautiful child." At the door, she paused. "Mr. Ricci asked me to give you this." She handed me a small velvet box, the kind that typically held jewelry. My heart skipped a beat. "Good night, Ms. Reeves," and then she was gone, leaving me alone with the mysterious box and my tumultuous thoughts. I sank onto the couch, turning the box over in my hands several times before finally gathering the courage to open it. Inside, nestled on black velvet, was a delicate gold bracelet with a single charm, a tiny, perfectly crafted lily flower, its petals inlaid with what looked suspiciously like diamonds. A small card lay beneath it, bearing the same bold handwriting as before. "For Lily. Every princess deserves a crown, but we'll start with this. M." I snapped the box closed, my hands trembling. The gift wasn't for me, it was for my daughter. Somehow that made it more intimate, more dangerous than if he'd given me diamonds. He wasn't just courting me, he was staking a claim on my child as well. 1 week, he'd said. 1 week to decide. But as I checked on Lily, sleeping peacefully in her crib surrounded by the new toys Matteo had provided, I wondered if the decision had already been made for me, the moment I'd stepped into that car, or perhaps even earlier, when his eyes had first met mine on that fateful train ride. The week that followed felt like living in two parallel worlds. By day, I was still Emma Reeves, single mom, waitress, struggling to make ends meet. By night, I lay awake, haunted by gray-blue eyes and the memory of lips pressed against my hand. No additional gifts arrived, no mysterious cars appeared outside my building. True to his word, Matteo had given me space to think. But his presence lingered in the new carrier I used for Lily, in the expensive formula that made her less colicky, in the tiny gold bracelet I kept in its box, unable to decide whether to accept such an extravagant gift for my infant daughter. On the third day, curiosity got the better of me. During Lily's nap, I searched Matteo Ricci online. The results were simultaneously revealing and opaque. Business articles mentioned him as the CEO of Ricci Enterprises, with interests in import-export, real estate, and hospitality. His photograph appeared at charity galas and high-profile events, always impeccably dressed, often alone or flanked by security rather than a date. But there were other mentions too, buried deeper. Whispered allegations of connections to organized crime, investigations that mysteriously closed without charges, competitors who suddenly sold their businesses or left town. Nothing concrete, nothing provable, just smoke suggesting a much larger fire. The Ricci family had historical ties to Sicily, one article noted, with American operations established in the 1950s. Matteo had taken over after his father's retirement 10 years ago and had expanded their influence considerably. Reading between the lines, it wasn't difficult to see what wasn't being explicitly stated. Matteo Ricci was almost certainly the head of a major crime family. I closed my laptop with shaking hands. What was I even considering? Getting involved with someone like him would be insanity. Yet the memory of his focused attention, the way he'd listened when I spoke of my dreams for Lily, the respect he'd shown for my role as her mother. These things haunted me, alongside the more unsettling revelations. On the 5th day, Derek called. My ex's number appearing on my phone screen was so unexpected that I almost didn't answer. We hadn't spoken since he'd signed away his rights to Lily, the final contact in a painful dissolution that had left me emotionally and financially devastated. "Emma." His voice sounded strange, almost frightened. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I replied cautiously. "Why wouldn't I be? I wanted to check on you. And Lily. Make sure everything's normal." A chill ran down my spine. "Derek, what's going on?" "Nothing. Nothing's going on." The forced casualness in his tone was alarming. "Just thinking about you guys lately. Listen, if you ever need to, I don't know, leave town or something, I could help with money." "Leave town? What are you talking about?" "Nothing. Forget I said anything." He paused. "Just be careful, Em, that's all." Before I could press further, he hung up, leaving me staring at the phone with a growing sense of unease. Had Mateo reached out to Derek somehow? The timing seemed too coincidental, especially given his interest in my ex during our dinner. By the 7th day, the deadline Mateo had set, I was a bundle of nerves. Lily sensed my anxiety, fussing more than usual as I paced our small apartment, jumping at every sound in the hallway. Would he simply appear at my door, send a car, call? As evening fell and Lily finally settled to sleep, I sat on the couch clutching a mug of tea that had long gone cold. The knock, when it came, was soft but decisive. 3 precise taps that somehow conveyed authority despite their restraint. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Mateo stood in the dimly lit hallway, as immaculate as ever in a dark suit that made his broad shoulders seem even more imposing. Without his security detail, he appeared both more approachable and somehow more dangerous. This was Mateo the man, not Mateo the businessman surrounded by his trappings of power. "Emma," he said simply, his eyes taking in my appearance. Worn jeans, a faded t-shirt, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. I hadn't dressed up, hadn't prepared. Some stubborn part of me had wanted him to see the real me, not the woman in the blue silk dress. "You came yourself," I observed, stepping back to let him in. Some matters should be handled personally. He entered my apartment, his presence immediately making the space seem smaller, shabbier. But if he noticed the peeling paint or the second-hand furniture, his expression revealed nothing. "Lily's asleep," I said, nodding toward the bedroom where the door stood slightly ajar. "She just went down." Mateo nodded, then surprised me by asking, "May I see her?" The request was unexpected, as was the almost gentle way he made it. I hesitated only briefly before leading him to the bedroom. Together we stood over Lily's crib, watching her sleep. Her tiny chest rose and fell with each breath, her rosebud lips slightly parted, one small hand curled beside her face. "She's perfect," Mateo murmured, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Yes, she is," I agreed, my throat tightening with emotion. We returned to the living room, the moment having shifted something between us, created an intimacy that transcended the physical space we occupied. "Did you contact Derek?" I asked without preamble, needing to address the suspicion that had been gnawing at me. Mateo's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. Not directly. "But you did something." He called me, sounding scared, offered money if I needed to leave town. A slight smile curved his lips. Perhaps he had a sudden attack of conscience. "Mateo." I crossed my arms. "What did you do?" "I made inquiries," he replied calmly, "about the man who abandoned his pregnant girlfriend, stole her savings, and left her to struggle alone." The casual way he described Derek's betrayal made it sound even worse than it had felt at the time. "And these inquiries somehow made him call me in a panic? Information is a powerful tool, Emma. Sometimes merely knowing that someone has been asking questions is enough to encourage reflection." A chill ran through me. "Did you threaten him?" "I didn't have to." Mateo took a step closer, his scent, that now familiar blend of expensive cologne and something darker, enveloping me. Men like him, who prey on the vulnerable, are always afraid deep down. They know what they deserve. The implication hung in the air between us. I should have been horrified, should have ordered him to leave. Instead, I found myself fighting an inappropriate urge to smile at the thought of Derek, who had left me at my most vulnerable, experiencing even a fraction of the fear and uncertainty he'd inflicted on me. "Have you decided?" Mateo asked, changing the subject with the confidence of a man accustomed to directing conversations. I took a deep breath. "I have questions first." He inclined his head slightly. Ask. The articles about you, the rumors, are they true? I forced myself to meet his gaze directly. Are you involved in organized crime? For a long moment, Matteo was silent, his expression unreadable. Then, to my surprise, he moved to sit on my couch, an oddly normal gesture in this surreal situation. He patted the space beside him, an invitation rather than a command. I sat, leaving enough space between us that we weren't touching, but close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. My family has operated outside conventional legal boundaries for generations, he finally said, his voice measured. We provide services that people need, but that the legitimate world cannot or will not offer. Protection, resolution, opportunity. It wasn't a direct confirmation, but it wasn't a denial either. Have you killed people? The question slipped out before I could stop it. His eyes met mine, unflinching. I have removed threats to my family and my interests. I don't take such actions lightly, but I don't hesitate when necessary. My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to continue. If I say yes to whatever this is, what would it mean for Lily? Would she be in danger because of your business? No. The word was spoken with absolute conviction. My personal life is separate from business matters, and if we were to become involved, you and Lily would be under my protection. No one would dare touch what belongs to me. The possessiveness in his tone should have repelled me. Instead, it sent a traitorous thrill down my spine. To be claimed so completely, to be sheltered rather than exposed. After years of struggling alone, the promise was seductive. And what about when you get bored with me? I challenged. When a newer, shinier toy catches your attention, Matteo's expression darkened, his hand suddenly cupping my face with surprising gentleness. You misunderstand me, Emma. I don't pursue women casually. What I feel for you isn't a passing interest. You barely know me, I whispered, though I didn't pull away from his touch. I know enough, he replied, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. I know you're brave. You faced down an armed robber to protect a stranger. I know you're resilient. You've raised your daughter alone despite every obstacle. I know you're loyal. You speak of Lily with a devotion that echoes my own values about family. Put like that, it sounded almost reasonable. Almost. And if I say no? I asked, echoing my question from the restaurant. His hand dropped from my face, and he leaned back slightly. Then I walk away. But I want you to be certain, Emma. I can give you and Lily security, comfort, opportunities that would otherwise be beyond reach. At what cost? Your company, your trust, eventually your heart. His gaze was unwavering. I'm a patient man, Emma. I can wait for the last part. The room felt too warm, the air too thick. I stood abruptly, needing physical distance to think clearly. What about your world? The danger, the violence? How can I raise a daughter in that environment? Matteo rose as well, his height making him tower over me slightly. My private life is separate from business. My home is a sanctuary. Lily would want for nothing, the best education, every advantage, a future without limits. The promise of such security was almost painful to contemplate after years of constant worry. And us? What would I be to you? A mistress? A girlfriend? Whatever develops between us would be genuine, he replied. I'm not offering a transaction, Emma. I'm offering a chance for something real. I turned away from him, needing to gather my thoughts without the distraction of those piercing eyes. Outside my window, the city lights twinkled in the darkness. Lives playing out in countless apartments just like mine, ordinary people making ordinary choices. None of them standing in their living rooms with a man who had just tacitly admitted to having people killed, offering protection and privilege in exchange for... what? My heart? My soul? Emma. Matteo's voice was gentle but insistent behind me. Look at me. I turned slowly, steeling myself against the magnetic pull he seemed to exert. This is crazy. You realize that, right? Normal people don't meet like this, don't have these kinds of conversations a week after meeting. A hint of a smile played at the corners of his mouth. I've never aspired to normalcy. And neither have you, I suspect. You don't know that, I protested. You don't know me, don't I? He stepped closer, not touching me but invading my space in a way that made my pulse quicken. The Emma Reeves that the world sees, the struggling waitress, the devoted mother. She would never have gotten into my car that first night. She would have called the police when a stranger knew her address, sent a driver, arranged childcare. But you did get in that car. You came to dinner. You're standing here now. His words struck an uncomfortable chord. He was right. Some part of me had been drawn to him, to the danger and possibility he represented. From that first moment on the train, there's something in you, Emma, something that recognizes something in me. He continued, his voice dropping lower. A hunger. A need for more than the life you've been living. I just want security for Lily, I insisted, though the excuse sounded hollow even to my own ears. Is that all? He reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my skin. Is that truly all you want? The touch sent electricity coursing through me. I swallowed hard, fighting against the pull of his gravity. You're a dangerous man. Yes, he acknowledged without hesitation, but not to you. Never to you or Lily. How can I believe that? How can I trust you? Matteo considered this for a moment. Trust is earned, not given. I don't expect blind faith. Let me prove myself day by day. From the bedroom, Lily's cry suddenly pierced the night, not her usual fussing, but a sharp, distressed wail that had me moving instantly, all other considerations forgotten. I rushed to her crib, heart racing. She was feverish to the touch, her small face contorted in pain, body rigid. Teething had been bothering her for days, but this seemed different, more severe. What's wrong? Matteo appeared in the doorway, his usual composed demeanor replaced by genuine concern. I don't know, I admitted, trying to keep panic from my voice as I lifted Lily from the crib. She continued to cry, a pained sound that tore at my heart. She's burning up. I need to take her temperature. I carried her to the bathroom where I kept the baby thermometer, Matteo following close behind. With shaking hands, I checked her temperature. 102.4, too high for simple teething. She needs a doctor, I said, fear making my voice tremble. It's after hours. I'll have to take her to the emergency room. Give her to me, Matteo said, already reaching for his phone. For a split second, protective instinct made me clutch Lily tighter, but the calm authority in his voice broke through my panic. I let him take her, surprised by the natural way he cradled her against his broad chest. Antonio. He spoke into the phone, his voice controlled but urgent. Dr. Levine. Now. Yes, the pediatrician. Emma's apartment. He rattled off my address, then listened briefly. 10 minutes. He ended the call and turned to me. Dr. Levine is the best pediatrician in the city. He'll be here in 10 minutes. Relief warred with disbelief. How? Later, Matteo interrupted gently. Let's focus on Lily now. Do you have infant fever reducer? I nodded, moving to the cabinet where I kept Lily's medications. Matteo continued to hold her, murmuring soothing words in what sounded like Italian as she cried against his shoulder. There was something surreal about seeing this powerful, dangerous man tenderly comforting my child, his large hand supporting her tiny head with such care. We administered the medication, and I took Lily back, pacing the living room floor while trying to comfort her. Matteo watched us, his eyes never leaving Lily's distressed face. When a sharp knock came at the door exactly 9 minutes after his call, he moved to answer it with the same efficiency he seemed to bring to everything. An older man with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair entered, carrying a medical bag. He didn't seem surprised, or put out to be making a house call at nearly 10 o'clock at night. Mr. Ricci, he greeted Matteo with a respectful nod, then turned to me. You must be Emma. And this little one is Lily. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur, as Dr. Levine examined Lily thoroughly, his manner gentle but professional. He diagnosed a severe ear infection, produced antibiotics from his bag, and gave detailed instructions for her care over the coming days. She'll start feeling better within 24 hours, he assured me, packing up his equipment. "The fever should break by morning. If it doesn't, or if anything concerns you, call me directly." He handed me a card with his private number. Anytime, day or night. "I don't know how to thank you," I said, overwhelmed by the personalized care that would have been unthinkable at an emergency room. "No thanks necessary," Dr. Levine replied with a smile. "It's my pleasure to help. Mr. Ricci has been very generous to my pediatric clinic over the years." After the doctor left, Lily finally settled, the medication beginning to ease her pain. I laid her back in her crib, the antibiotics administered, a cool cloth on her forehead. She drifted into an uneasy sleep as I stroked her cheek. When I returned to the living room, Matteo stood by the window, his posture tense, hands in his pockets. He turned as I approached. "Thank you," I said simply, "for the doctor, for everything." He nodded once, his eyes searching mine. "This is what I was talking about, Emma. Protection. Resources. Being able to call the best doctor in the city instead of waiting hours in an emergency room." The truth of his words hit me with full force. How different would tonight have been without Matteo? The frantic cab ride to the hospital. The endless wait surrounded by other sick children. The harried doctor who might have spent 5 minutes with Lily before prescribing medication we'd have to find an all-night pharmacy to fill. "She'll be okay?" he asked, a vulnerability in his voice I hadn't heard before. "Yes, thanks to you." I stepped closer to him, drawn by something I couldn't name. "You were good with her. Natural." Something complex passed across his features. "Children are innocent, sacred. They should be protected at all costs." Another piece of the puzzle that was Matteo Ricci fell into place. His business, his world, it operated by its own moral code, separate from conventional law but no less rigid in its principles. Family above all. Protection of the innocent. Loyalty rewarded. Betrayal punished. "Yes," I whispered, suddenly exhausted from the emotional whiplash of the evening. Matteo must have noticed my fatigue. "You should rest," he said, checking his watch. "I'll have Antonio stay outside your door tonight in case you need anything." The thought of having someone standing guard should have felt intrusive, but instead brought a sense of security I hadn't realized I craved. "You don't have to do that. I want to," he replied simply. He moved toward the door, then paused, turning back to me. "You never gave me your answer, Emma." I looked at him. This complex, dangerous, surprisingly gentle man who had upended my life in the span of a week. In the face of Lily's distress, he had shown his true colors. Not the polished businessman from the restaurant, or the imposing figure from the train, but someone who could spring into action when it mattered, who could hold my daughter with genuine care, who had resources that could make our lives not just easier, but better. "Yes," I said softly. The single word hung between us, weighted with meaning beyond its simplicity. Matteo's eyes darkened, his posture shifting subtly. "Yes, to what, exactly?" he pressed, needing to hear me say it. I took a deep breath. "Yes to this. To us. To seeing where it leads." He closed the distance between us in 2 strides, his hand coming up to cup my face. "I won't disappoint you, Emma, or Lily." Before I could respond, his lips found mine in a kiss that was both tender and possessive. Unlike everything else about him, there was nothing controlled about the way he kissed. It was raw, hungry, as if he'd been holding himself back until this moment. My hands found his shoulders, the solid muscle beneath his suit jacket a stark reminder of the strength he kept carefully leashed. When we broke apart, both breathing harder, his eyes had that storm-tossed quality that made my stomach flip. "I should go," he murmured, his thumb tracing my lower lip. "You need rest, and Lily needs you." I nodded, unable to form coherent thoughts with him so close, the taste of him still on my lips. "Tomorrow," he said. Not a question, but a statement of fact. "I'll send a car at noon, pack enough for the weekend for both you and Lily." "The weekend?" I echoed, momentarily confused. "I have work, and Lily's sick." "Your shifts are covered," he replied smoothly, "and the sea air will be good for Lily's recovery. My house on the coast has everything she might need, and Dr. Levine is only a call away. The casual display of power, arranging my schedule without consultation, should have bothered me. Instead, I found myself relieved at having decisions made, paths cleared. Okay, I agreed, surprising myself with how easily I acquiesced. The weekend. Something like triumph flashed in his eyes, quickly masked. He kissed me once more, a brief but claiming pressure, then stepped back. Antonio will stay until morning, he reminded me. If Lily's fever doesn't break, or if you need anything at all, he'll contact me immediately. At the door, he paused, his expression softening as he looked back at me. Sleep well, Emma. After he left, I checked on Lily again, relieved to find her sleeping more peacefully, her skin slightly cooler to the touch. The events of the evening played through my mind as I prepared for bed. Mateo's confession about his business, the sudden illness, the kiss that had awakened something I thought long dead. I should have been more conflicted about my decision. The rational part of my brain understood exactly what and who I was getting involved with. Matteo Ricci lived in a world of power plays and violence, of loyalty enforced by fear as much as respect. By saying yes, I was stepping into that world, bringing Lily with me. Yet as I drifted toward sleep, what I felt wasn't fear or doubt, but a strange sense of rightness, as if pieces long scattered were finally falling into place. Since Derek's betrayal, I'd been adrift, focused solely on survival. Matteo offered something beyond mere existence, protection, yes, but also passion, purpose, a belonging I hadn't realized I craved. Tomorrow would bring a new chapter, full of unknowns, but for tonight, knowing Antonio stood guard outside, that Matteo was a phone call away, if Lily's condition worsened, I allowed myself to truly relax for the first time in months. Whatever storm I was sailing into with Matteo Ricci, at least Lily and I wouldn't be fighting the waves alone anymore. And perhaps, in the shelter of his protection, we might find not just security, but happiness. Not the normal, ordinary happiness I'd once thought I wanted, but something deeper, more intense. A happiness earned through risk, through choosing the dangerous path instead of the safe one. As sleep finally claimed me, Matteo's words echoed in my mind. I've never aspired to normalcy, and neither have you, I suspect. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps I never had.